She opened the CEO's dropped folder. Inside was a birth record matching her daughter's exact details. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was just another regular evening at the exclusive restaurant in downtown Manhattan. The air inside was filled with the soft clinking of glasses, quiet conversations, and the luxurious scent of gourmet dishes being served. Christina Matthews, a waitress in her late 20s, moved silently between tables, her eyes focused, her hands graceful as she balanced plates of food and glasses of wine. She had been working at the restaurant for months, doing her best to keep her head down and get through each shift without drawing attention to herself. After all, she was just another face in the sea of busy waitstaff. But tonight was different. As she carried a fresh glass of sparkling water to table 7, she couldn't help but notice the man sitting alone, checking his phone with an air of impatience. He looked important, well-dressed in an expensive suit, and his sharp features screamed power. This was Jack Anderson, the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the world. Christina had seen him before, but always from a distance. He was the kind of man who didn't look twice at people like her. As she approached his table, he barely looked up, waving his hand dismissively as he glanced at his watch. "I'm waiting for someone," he said, his voice cold, not even bothering to make eye contact. Christina nodded politely and set down the water, keeping her gaze steady and neutral. She had seen this attitude before. "Of course, sir," she replied with a practiced smile. "Would you like to start with an appetizer, or should I come back?" Without waiting for a response, she turned to walk away, but something stopped her. A small voice inside her head told her to stay, to pay attention. She didn't know why. She had learned long ago that people like him didn't care about people like her. But for some reason, she felt drawn to this man. A few minutes later, Jack's phone buzzed, and he looked at the screen with a frown. He typed a quick message, then glanced around the room impatiently. Christina returned to his table, offering a polite smile, but her mind was elsewhere. She could feel his frustration in the air. "Have you heard from your guest, Mr. Anderson?" she asked. His sharp gaze lifted, locking onto hers for a brief moment. "No," he muttered. "I've been waiting for over an hour." He ran a hand through his dark hair and sighed, looking defeated. "Bring me the ribeye, medium rare, and another whiskey neat." Christina nodded, ready to take his order, but as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A folder, a manila folder, had slipped off the edge of the table and landed on the floor. Jack had been so focused on his phone, he hadn't noticed. Christina bent down to pick it up, her fingers grazing the edge of the folder. As she did, she noticed something strange. The folder wasn't just filled with business documents. It had something else inside, something personal. She opened the folder, just to make sure it wasn't something Jack would need immediately, but what she saw inside made her freeze. A birth record. Her heart skipped a beat as she scanned the document. The details on the birth certificate were chilling. It was her daughter's birth record, her daughter's name, her daughter's date of birth. Everything matched perfectly. But how? How was this possible? She had to have been mistaken. There was no way. But as she stared at the paper, she couldn't deny it. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the folder back down on the table. Her mind was racing. Could it be a coincidence? Was there some mistake? Or had Jack Anderson, the powerful CEO, somehow been connected to her daughter in a way that was unimaginable? This was no ordinary night. Something was about to change, and Christina had no idea how deep this rabbit hole would go. Christina stood frozen for a moment, staring at the birth certificate that had just fallen from Jack Anderson's folder. Her mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. How could this be? She had no idea how long she stood there, barely able to breathe, but she quickly realized she couldn't just leave it there. She was a waitress, not a detective, and certainly not someone who could confront a powerful CEO about something as personal as a birth record. But still, the information was undeniable. Her daughter's name was right there on the document. Everything matched. The day she had given birth, the location, the exact time. It was all too real to ignore. Her thoughts raced. Should she ask Jack about it? Should she keep it to herself and forget it ever happened? It was so strange, so impossible, that she couldn't process it all. She slowly straightened up, putting the folder back where it had fallen, her hands trembling. She needed to keep her composure. She had a job to do. She couldn't let this affect her. At least not yet. Christina forced herself to step away from the table, but her mind remained focused on one thing: Jack Anderson. Who was this man really? And why was her daughter's birth record inside his folder? As she returned to the kitchen, she tried to shake off the feeling that something monumental had just occurred. But she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her gut. It wasn't just a coincidence. She had to know more. The evening passed slowly, the rhythmic clinking of plates and silverware filling the background as Christina worked through her shift, but her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the folder, to the birth certificate. Who could have placed it there? Was it possible that Jack was connected to her daughter in some way she didn't understand? As she refilled glasses and brought out plates, she tried to act as normal as possible, but the unsettling truth hung over her. Jack Anderson was more than just a wealthy businessman. He was somehow tied to her past in a way that she couldn't yet comprehend. When the night finally came to an end, Christina found herself alone in the employee locker room, her shift over. She glanced at her phone, the screen lighting up with messages from her mother about her daughter's school schedule. But Christina wasn't thinking about that right now. She couldn't focus on anything other than the mysterious connection between her and Jack. She pulled her coat on slowly, her fingers shaking. What was she supposed to do with this information? Should she confront him? Was it even her place to say anything? Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from a number she didn't recognize. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she read it. It was a simple text: "Meet me tomorrow. I know who you are." Her heart skipped a beat. Was this from Jack? Or someone else? She stared at the message, her mind spinning. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Someone knew something, and they were trying to draw her into whatever web had been set in motion that night. She felt a cold chill sweep through her. It was as though the universe was pushing her towards something she wasn't ready for, something far bigger than herself. But what could she do? She couldn't ignore it. She had to find out more. She quickly texted back, "Who is this?" But there was no response. She stared at the phone screen for a few more moments, her mind racing with the possibilities. Was this someone who had been watching her? Someone who knew about the birth record? The suspense was unbearable. She knew she couldn't just sit back and do nothing. She had to meet this person, had to know the truth. The next day, Christina found herself standing in front of a small, nondescript office building in downtown Manhattan. It was a sharp contrast to the sleek skyscrapers that surrounded it, but something about the place felt ominous. She had no idea what to expect. She had no idea who she was meeting or what they wanted, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. Her footsteps echoed as she entered the building, and her mind raced with questions. Who was she about to meet? And what did they know? The receptionist looked at her curiously as she approached the desk. "I'm here to see someone," Christina said, her voice steady, though her insides were a mess of nerves. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked. Christina hesitated. "I was told to come." The receptionist raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Go right in. He's expecting you." Christina's heart skipped again. She stepped into the waiting area, where a man sat at a desk. He was older, dressed in a sharp suit that looked far too expensive for a place like this. His eyes were hard, calculating, and he didn't even look up as she approached. "Miss Matthews," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I've been waiting for you." The tension in the room was palpable, and Christina could feel the weight of his gaze. It was as though he was assessing her every move, every word. She swallowed hard, steeling herself for whatever came next. Christina stood frozen in the doorway, the air in the office heavy with an unsettling tension. The man sitting at the desk didn't look up at first. His sharp eyes, hidden behind expensive glasses, were locked on the documents in front of him. The silence felt like it stretched on forever, each second heavier than the last. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. The man finally looked up, his gaze sharp, as though he had been waiting for her. "You're Christina Matthews," he said, his voice calm, almost indifferent. Christina's heart pounded in her chest. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. "And you're here because you've discovered something you shouldn't have." Christina's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. The man studied her for a long moment, as if measuring her every reaction. "I want to know how much you really understand," he said. "About the birth certificate. About what's really going on." Christina's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" she asked, though she already knew where this was heading. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his face. "I'm assuming you've seen the birth record that was inside the folder you picked up last night." He let the words hang in the air, waiting for her response. Christina's mind raced. How did he know? Was he watching her? Was this all some kind of setup? She nodded slowly, too afraid to speak. "It's not a coincidence," he continued, his voice low. "You're not the first person to stumble upon that record, but you're the first one to react the way you have. Most people would have ignored it, but you didn't. And now you're here." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and Christina could feel the weight of them pressing down on her chest. She had to get control of this situation. She had to understand what was really happening. "What is this about?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. The man stood up and walked around the desk, his movements calculated and deliberate. "Let's start with the basics," he said, stopping just in front of her. "That document you found, it's not just any birth certificate. It's a record that ties you to someone very important. Someone who you don't know about yet." Christina's head spun. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying," he said, "that you and Jack Anderson share a connection. A connection that goes beyond business. Beyond coincidence." His words hit her like a ton of bricks. Jack Anderson, the man she had served countless times without ever thinking much of him. He was tied to her? It didn't make sense. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's not possible." The man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm afraid it is." Christina's heart hammered in her chest as the pieces began to fall into place. The document, the CEO, her daughter's name. This wasn't just a random encounter. This wasn't a mistake. Jack Anderson was somehow part of her life in a way she never could have imagined. But why? And how? The man in front of her seemed to read her thoughts. "You're probably wondering why. How Jack Anderson fits into all of this," he said, almost as if he was expecting her to ask. But the answer isn't simple. It's not just about you and him. It's about something bigger. A story that's been hidden for a long time. Christina opened her mouth to ask, but no words came out. She was overwhelmed, confused, and terrified. What was he talking about? And why was she being pulled into this? "The truth," he said, taking a step back, "is that Jack Anderson is your father." Christina's world seemed to stop. Her blood ran cold. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." The man's expression softened, just a little, though there was no warmth in his gaze. "I know it's a lot to take in, but the evidence is there. The DNA test, the birth certificate, it all points to one thing." Christina took a step back, as if the weight of the words had physically pushed her away. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Everything she knew, everything she thought was true, was now called into question. "Why didn't he tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man shook his head. "You'll have to ask him that. But one thing is certain, he doesn't know about you. Not yet." Christina's mind raced. "So what now? What do I do with this information?" The man's expression remained unreadable. "That's up to you," he said. "But be careful. This is bigger than you think. And you might not be ready for what happens next." Christina stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words sank in. Jack Anderson, the man she had served in the restaurant, the man she had never imagined would be a part of her life, was her father. And now, everything was about to change. Christina stood there, frozen, as the words from the man who had called her into his office echoed in her mind. Jack Anderson, the CEO she had served for months without thinking much of him, was her father. It felt like her entire world had been flipped upside down. How could this be? How could she, a simple waitress, have such a connection to someone like him? She had been raised alone, with no answers, no father, and now, all of a sudden, this revelation shook her to her core. Her legs felt weak as she stumbled back, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. The man in front of her was still watching her with calculating eyes, waiting for her to process the information. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. "This is too much," she whispered. I can't believe this." He leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. "I understand it's hard to take in," he said, "but the facts are clear. Jack Anderson is your father, and now you have to decide what to do with that knowledge. Christina felt a wave of anger rise within her. How could he not tell me? How could he not be there for me? She demanded, her voice trembling. Why was I kept in the dark for so long? The man sighed, clearly expecting this reaction. Jack doesn't know about you, Christina, he said. He has no idea that you exist. This is something he's unaware of, something that has been kept from him. Christina shook her head, unable to comprehend the situation. So you're telling me that for all these years, he never knew I was his daughter? Exactly, the man replied. And you've been living your life, completely unaware of who your father is. Christina's mind was spinning. She couldn't understand why this was happening. Why her? Why now? She had never asked for this. She had been content with her life, raising her daughter and working long shifts to make ends meet. But now, everything was different. Everything was going to change. What do I do now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. You have a choice, the man said, his tone colder now. You can keep this secret, move on with your life, and never tell Jack. Or you can go to him, tell him the truth, and let him know that he has a daughter. Christina's heart raced at the thought. Could she really do that? Could she go to Jack Anderson, the powerful CEO who had never shown her an ounce of kindness, and tell him the truth? What would he say? What would he do? Would he want to be a part of her life? Would he even care? She didn't know the answers to any of those questions. But what she did know was that her life would never be the same again. I don't even know where to start, she said, her voice shaky. I don't know if I can do this. The man looked at her with something like pity. You don't have to do anything right now. But the longer you wait, the harder it will be. Jack needs to know the truth. Christina closed her eyes, trying to block out the swirling thoughts in her head. She couldn't do this. She couldn't just walk up to him and tell him she was his daughter. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore it. She had a right to know her father. And maybe, just maybe, he had a right to know her. But the fear that gripped her was paralyzing. She was just a waitress, a single mother trying to survive. What could a man like Jack Anderson possibly want with her? She had no answers, and the unknown terrified her. What if he rejects me? She asked softly, the question hanging in the air. What if he doesn't want me in his life? The man stood up, his face hardening. That's a risk you'll have to take. But you'll never know unless you try. His words stung. They were harsh, but true. She couldn't live her life wondering what might have been. She had to make a decision. She had to face the truth. I need to think about this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man gave her a cold smile. Take all the time you need. But just know that Jack is out there, and he doesn't even know you exist. It's time to decide if you want to change that. With those final words, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Christina standing there alone, her mind a whirlwind of questions. She knew her life had just taken an unimaginable turn. The only thing left to do was figure out what came next. Christina stood alone in the small, dimly lit office, the man's words still echoing in her mind. She had never felt so lost, so uncertain. The weight of the truth was crushing her chest. Jack Anderson was her father, a powerful CEO she had served in a restaurant countless times, yet never imagined would have any connection to her life. She couldn't even fathom how to process this information. All her life, she had raised her daughter alone, without answers, without knowing who her father was. And now, everything had changed in an instant. The truth was staring her in the face, but she didn't know what to do with it. As she stepped out of the office, her mind raced. The streets of Manhattan seemed like they were moving in fast forward, while she was frozen in place. She had to make a decision. She had to face Jack. But where would she even begin? Could she really walk up to him and tell him the truth? She was just a waitress, a single mother, struggling to make ends meet. What did someone like Jack Anderson want with her? What if he didn't believe her? What if he rejected her, just like the man in the office had warned? She wasn't sure she could handle that. What if he turned his back on her, just like everyone else? She had spent her whole life trying to stay hidden, to keep her head down and get by. Now, she had to decide whether or not to expose herself to the possibility of rejection from the man who had unknowingly fathered her. She had always done everything on her own. But now, the truth was forcing her to confront something far bigger than she could ever have imagined. The next morning, as the city bustled around her, Christina found herself standing in front of the tall glass building that housed Jack Anderson's company. Her heart raced as she stared up at the massive structure. She had never been inside a building like this before. It felt like a world she didn't belong to. But here she was, standing at the doorstep of the man who was, in some twisted way, her father. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she pushed open the door. The receptionist looked up at her, her expression neutral. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice clipped. Christina felt her throat tighten. "I need to see Jack Anderson," she said, her voice shaky. The receptionist's eyebrows raised, a look of surprise flashing across her face. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Christina replied, her voice growing more determined. "But it's important." The receptionist hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone. Christina's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. There was no turning back now. She had to face Jack, face the man who was supposed to be her father. A few moments later, the receptionist looked back at her. "Mr. Anderson will see you," she said, her tone still neutral, but something in her eyes told Christina that she was being evaluated, judged. As Christina walked through the sleek hallways, the sound of her footsteps echoed against the polished floors. The walls were adorned with expensive artwork, the atmosphere cold and professional. She felt like a fish out of water. She didn't belong here. She wasn't a part of this world. She was just a waitress, a single mother struggling to make ends meet. And now, she was about to meet the man who could change everything. As she reached Jack's office, the door opened, and she found herself face to face with the man she had seen only from a distance, the man whose folder she had found the night before. Jack Anderson. He looked different up close. The sharp features she had seen from across the restaurant now seemed softer, though the intensity in his eyes was unmistakable. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, she saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Christina," he said, his voice low, but there was no warmth in it. "What's this about?" She opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. She had no idea where to begin. How could she tell him? How could she explain something so impossible, so strange, to a man like him? She had never expected to find herself here. But now that she had no choice but to speak the truth. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. She could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "It's about the folder you dropped last night," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "The birth certificate that was inside." Jack's face changed. For a brief moment, Christina thought she saw something like recognition in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone growing colder. Christina swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "I found it," she said. "The birth certificate. It has my daughter's name on it. And it has your name too." Jack froze. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, but he quickly regained his composure. "That's impossible," he said, his voice sharp. "I don't know what you think you found, but you're wrong." Christina's heart sank. This wasn't going how she thought it would. She had prepared herself for this moment, but now that she was here, she wasn't sure what to do next. "It's not a mistake," she said, her voice firmer now. "I know what I saw." She took a step forward, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You're my father, Jack." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. Jack's face turned pale, and for the first time, he looked genuinely rattled. "No," he whispered, as if the idea itself was too much to bear. "That's not possible." But Christina knew it was. The truth was inescapable. And now, they both had to face it. Jack's hands were trembling slightly as he leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Christina. The room felt suffocating, the silence hanging heavy between them. For a moment, he didn't say anything. His mind was clearly racing, processing the words Christina had just thrown at him. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then leaned forward, as if the effort of speaking took everything out of him. "This can't be happening," he muttered, shaking his head slowly. "There must be some mistake." Christina stood there, rooted to the spot. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. She couldn't let him dismiss this. "I wish it was a mistake, Jack," she said, her voice steady but firm. "But I know what I saw. The birth certificate. It's real. You are my father." Jack's face turned pale, his expression one of disbelief. He stared at her as though he was trying to make sense of what she was saying. I don't understand," he finally managed. "I don't remember any of this." "I didn't know." His voice trailed off, and for the first time, Christina saw the hint of vulnerability in his eyes. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. "I never knew about you," he said quietly. "I didn't even know I had a child." Christina's heart clenched. The pain in his voice was undeniable, and for a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But she couldn't forget the truth. She couldn't forget the years of her life she had spent raising her daughter alone. "I don't expect you to remember," she said, her voice softening just a little. "But you have to understand, this is not just about me. This is about my daughter. She deserves to know who you are. She deserves the truth." Jack ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to process everything. "I don't even know where to start," he said, almost to himself. "I've spent my entire life focused on my business. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to do any of this." Christina felt a surge of frustration, but she pushed it down. She had to stay composed. She had come here for answers, not to listen to excuses. "You don't have to be perfect," she said, her voice firm. "You just have to be real. My daughter deserves that. She deserves to know her father, whether you're ready for it or not." Jack looked at her for a long moment, and then, to her surprise, he nodded slowly. "I don't know what to do with all of this," he said. "But I can't deny it anymore. You're telling me the truth, and I'm going to have to figure it out." Christina nodded. She wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but she knew that this was the first step. The first step toward finding out who Jack really was, and what role he could play in her daughter's life. "I'm not asking for anything from you," she said, her voice quiet. "I just want you to understand that my daughter needs answers. She deserves to know the truth about her family." Jack stared at her for a long moment, his brow furrowed. "And what do you want me to do?" he asked. "I don't know," Christina admitted. "I just want you to think about it. I want you to consider the possibility of being a part of her life, of being a father. I know it's not going to be easy, but you have to start somewhere." Jack stood up from his desk, walking over to the window. He stared out over the city, lost in thought. Christina watched him, unsure of what to say next. The silence in the room was oppressive, and she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had never imagined this moment would be so difficult. She had expected answers, but now all she had were more questions. Jack turned back toward her, his face a mask of uncertainty. "I've been so focused on building my empire," he said quietly, "that I've missed everything else. I've missed the things that matter. I've missed you." Christina's heart skipped a beat. There was a rawness in his voice that she hadn't expected. She had always seen him as distant, untouchable, a man who lived in a world far beyond her own. But now, for the first time, she saw a man who was struggling, just like her. "I can't go back and change the past," Jack continued. "I can't make up for the years I've missed. But I'll try. For you. For your daughter." Christina felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She hadn't expected him to say that. She hadn't expected him to even consider being a part of their lives. But here he was, making an effort, even if it was just the beginning. "That's all I'm asking for," she said quietly. Jack walked over to her, his expression more open than it had been all afternoon. "I don't know how to be a father," he said again, "but I'm willing to try." Christina looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "That's a start," she said softly. "That's all we need." The weight of the conversation hung in the air, but for the first time, Christina felt a flicker of hope. Maybe things weren't as impossible as they seemed. Maybe, just maybe, they could start over. Together. Christina sat at the small table in the corner of the restaurant, her fingers tapping nervously against the edge. It had been a few days since her conversation with Jack, and though she had left that meeting with a sense of cautious optimism, now, in the quiet of the afternoon, doubt began to creep in. The city outside seemed to pulse with energy, a stark contrast to the quiet turmoil she felt within. Could she really allow Jack Anderson, the man who had never been a part of her life, to become a part of her daughter's world? Could she trust him to be the father he had never been? These questions spun in her mind as she stared out the window, watching the world pass by. She hadn't seen Jack since their meeting, and he hadn't reached out either. She knew he was busy, but a part of her had expected something. Maybe a call, an invitation to meet again. But nothing. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, "Mia, how's it going? Any news?" Christina hesitated for a moment before typing back, "Not much. We talked, but nothing has really changed." Mia's response came almost instantly. "Don't give up on him just yet. Maybe he needs time." Christina put the phone down, leaning back in her chair, sighing deeply. Mia was right. She couldn't expect everything to change overnight. But even so, a part of her wondered if it was all just a mistake. She had lived her whole life without Jack, and it had been fine. She had made it work. She had raised her daughter with love and care. She didn't need a man like Jack to come in and complicate things. But then again, her daughter deserved to know the truth. She deserved to know her father. The thought of her little girl, asking questions about who her dad was, gnawed at her. Could she keep this secret from her? Could she pretend that everything was normal, when deep down, it felt like everything was shifting? As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email notification. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was from Jack. She opened it quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. Christina, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I know I'm not ready for this, but I want to try. I want to meet your daughter. I know I have a lot to prove, but I need to start somewhere. Can we meet again? Jack. Christina stared at the message, her mind racing. So he was reaching out. He wanted to try? But what did that mean? What was she supposed to do with this? She felt a mix of relief and fear. What if this was just another empty promise? What if he changed his mind? She had to be careful. She had to protect her daughter, no matter what. Taking a deep breath, Christina typed a quick response. Let's meet tomorrow. Same time, same place. She hit send before she could overthink it. The decision had been made. She couldn't keep her daughter from the truth any longer. The next day, Christina arrived at the small park near her apartment, her heart pounding as she waited. She wasn't sure what she expected from Jack, but she knew she couldn't back out now. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, her fingers trembling slightly. It was a text from him. I'm here. Christina looked up and saw Jack standing at the entrance of the park, his eyes scanning the area. When their eyes met, she felt a jolt of something deep within her. He was here, and he was serious. She stood up, walking toward him slowly. As she approached, Jack's face softened, and he gave her a tentative smile. Thank you for meeting me, he said, his voice low. I know I've said a lot of things, but I'm not sure how to do this. Christina nodded, her expression guarded. It's not going to be easy, she said, her voice steady. But you're here now. That's a start. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. I know I have a lot to make up for, he said. But I'm willing to try. I want to get to know her. Christina felt a pang in her chest. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her daughter. And if Jack was willing to make the effort, maybe it was worth giving him a chance. I'm not sure if she's ready, Christina said softly. She's been through a lot, and I don't want to hurt her. Jack nodded, his gaze steady. I understand. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. They stood there in silence for a few moments, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Christina spoke again. I'll talk to her, she said. I'll tell her about you. But you need to understand, this won't be easy. She's been asking questions, but she's scared too. Jack nodded again. I know. I'll take it slow. I just want to be there for her, in whatever way she needs. Christina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. This wasn't going to be easy, but maybe it was time to take the first step. Okay, she said, her voice soft but firm. We'll see where this goes. Jack smiled, a real smile this time. And for the first time, Christina allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Together, they would figure this out. The following day, Christina sat in her living room, a cup of lukewarm coffee resting on the table in front of her. The sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft shadows across the room, but there was little warmth in her heart. Her mind was consumed with the conversation she had with Jack just hours ago. She hadn't expected it to be so difficult. She had hoped that once she decided to tell her daughter, everything would fall into place, but now she wasn't so sure. She had no idea how Mia, her daughter, would react. She had always kept her life simple, keeping Mia safe and sheltered from the complexities of the world, including the absence of a father. The truth was, Mia had never asked about her father. Christina had never thought it was necessary to bring up. Mia was just a child, after all, and children didn't need to know things they couldn't understand. But now, the time had come. Mia was old enough to have questions, and Christina couldn't keep lying to her. She took a deep breath, knowing the time had come. Mia was playing in her room, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit her world. Christina stood up, walking slowly toward her daughter's room. She paused outside the door, listening to the sounds of her little girl laughing as she played with her dolls. Christina's heart ached at the thought of disrupting that innocent world, but she had no choice. She gently knocked on the door. "Mia, can I come in?" There was a pause, and then the sound of footsteps. "Sure, Mom." Mia's voice was bright and cheerful. Christina opened the door and found her daughter sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by her toys. She had a smile on her face, her eyes full of innocence. Christina sat down beside her, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Sweetheart, we need to talk." Mia looked up at her, her face turning serious. "About what, Mom?" Christina hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. "About something important. Something about your father." Mia's brow furrowed slightly. "My father? But I don't have a father." Christina took her daughter's hand, her voice soft and gentle. "Actually, you do, Mia, and I think it's time you know the truth." Mia looked up at her with wide, confused eyes. "What do you mean, Mom?" Christina took another deep breath. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. "Your father is someone I've known for a long time. His name is Jack Anderson, and he's a very important man. And," she paused, trying to find the right words. "He's your father, Mia." The room fell into a heavy silence. Mia stared at her, processing the information. She looked confused, and Christina could see the wheels turning in her young mind. "But why didn't you ever tell me about him?" Mia asked quietly. Christina swallowed hard. "I didn't want to hurt you, sweetheart. I thought it was better that you didn't know. But now I realize that I've been keeping something from you that you deserve to know." Mia looked down at her toys, her small hands fidgeting. "So, you want me to meet him?" Christina hesitated. "I think it's up to you, Mia. If you want to meet him, we can. But I want you to know, this is a big decision. It's not going to be easy, and it might be a little confusing at first." Mia nodded slowly, her mind clearly still processing everything. "Can I meet him tomorrow?" she asked quietly. Christina felt her heart ache at the thought of her daughter making this decision. She had always protected Mia from the harsh truths of life, but now, she was forcing her to face a reality that would change everything. "We can meet him tomorrow if you're ready," Christina said softly. "But remember, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." Mia stood up, her little face serious for the first time. "I want to meet him, Mom. I want to know who my father is." Christina smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm proud of you, Mia. I'll be right here with you, no matter what happens." That night, Christina lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She had never imagined that her daughter's life would be turned upside down like this. She had spent years keeping the truth hidden, trying to protect Mia from the pain of not knowing her father. But now, there was no avoiding it. The truth had a way of coming out, no matter how hard you tried to keep it in. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. Christina wasn't sure where this journey would take them, but she knew one thing for sure. She would stand by her daughter, no matter what. The next morning, Christina and Mia made their way to the same park where she had met Jack just days before. As they approached, Christina felt a knot form in her stomach. This was it, the moment of truth. Mia's hand was warm in hers, and Christina squeezed it gently, offering her daughter a reassuring smile. Jack was already waiting for them, standing near the entrance, looking just as nervous as she felt. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, he seemed to hesitate. But then, he stepped forward. "Mia," he said softly, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I'm Jack, your father." Mia looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly, her voice surprisingly calm. Christina watched the two of them, her heart in her throat. This was the moment that would change everything. But she couldn't predict what would happen next. Would they connect? Would Jack be the father Mia had always deserved? Or would this just be another broken promise? Only time would tell. Christina watched nervously as Mia stepped forward, her small hand slipping from her own and reaching toward Jack. The moment felt suspended in time, as if the world had momentarily paused to watch what was unfolding in front of them. Jack crouched down to Mia's level, his face filled with uncertainty, but also a trace of hope. "Hi, Mia," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Mia didn't answer immediately. She just studied him for a moment, her eyes wide but curious, taking him in. She had always been so intuitive, even at her young age, and Christina could see that she was processing everything at once. "You look like me," Mia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's eyes softened at her words. It was as if the last wall of resistance inside him had come crashing down. "I've heard that a lot," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You've got my eyes, Mia." There was a long pause as Mia continued to look at him, her small hands clasped together nervously. Finally, she stepped closer, not breaking eye contact. "Why weren't you with me before?" The question hung in the air, sharp and honest. Christina felt a pang in her chest. She had always feared this moment, the moment when Mia would realize that Jack had never been a part of her life. She had always been the one to protect Mia, the one to keep her safe from the unknown. But now, here it was, the truth, raw and unfiltered. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes searching for the right words. "I wasn't ready," he said, his voice low and almost regretful. "I didn't know about you, Mia. I didn't even know I had a daughter until recently." Mia blinked, processing the words. "You didn't know?" she repeated, her brows furrowing slightly. "How could you not know?" Jack stood up slowly, looking at Christina before turning his attention back to Mia. "It's a long story," he said softly. "But it's not your fault. It's not something I'm proud of." Christina saw the tension in Jack's shoulders, the weight of years of regret and missed opportunities, and for the first time, she could see the man behind the title of CEO. He wasn't the invincible figure she had once imagined him to be. He was human, vulnerable, and facing the consequences of his choices. Mia seemed to sense the heaviness in the air, and after a moment of silence, she took another step forward, her face softening. "I don't know what to call you," she said quietly, her voice uncertain. Jack's expression melted with tenderness as he crouched down once more, this time kneeling in front of her. "You can call me whatever you want, Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm just glad you're here, and I'm going to do everything I can to make up for the time I missed." Mia looked at him for a moment longer, as if weighing his words. Then, to Christina's surprise, she smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Okay, Dad," she said softly, almost as if testing the word on her tongue. Christina's heart swelled at the sound of it, though it was tinged with the bittersweet realization of how much time had been lost. But for the first time, she saw a glimmer of something more in Jack's eyes, a desire to make things right, a desire to be the father Mia deserved. Jack straightened up and turned to Christina, his expression more open now, more vulnerable than before. "I know I don't deserve this, but I'm asking for a chance," he said. "A chance to be part of her life. A chance to be her father." Christina felt a lump form in her throat, but she didn't let it show. She had come into this moment unsure, uncertain of what the right choice was. But seeing Jack now, seeing the way he was trying, she couldn't deny that there was potential here. There was a chance. For Mia. For all of them. She nodded slowly, her eyes meeting Jack's. "You've got a chance," she said, her voice steady. "But you have to prove it. To her. To me." Jack's face softened, and he nodded. "I will. I promise." Mia, still standing a few steps away, looked up at both of them. "So, are we going to do something now?" she asked, her voice full of the innocent curiosity that only a child could carry. Christina laughed softly, feeling a wave of warmth spread through her. "I think we can start with getting some ice cream," she said, her smile genuine. Jack's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That sounds perfect," he said. "Let's go." As they walked toward the car, Christina felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders, if only for a moment. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be bumps, and there would be challenges. But for the first time in a long time, Christina felt hopeful. Maybe this could work. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something together. Mia was already running ahead, excited about the prospect of ice cream, and Christina couldn't help but smile. She had always protected Mia, kept her sheltered from the world's complexities. But now, it seemed like it was time for them to step into the unknown, together. And with that, she felt the first flicker of peace in her heart. They were a family now, however imperfect, and that was enough for today. The following weeks passed in a blur for Christina. Life, despite the newfound reality of having Jack in their lives, had to go on. She worked her shifts, spent time with Mia, and tried to process everything that had happened in such a short span of time. Jack had been true to his word, trying to be a part of Mia's life. He showed up when he said he would, and he made an effort, albeit cautiously, to build a relationship with Mia. But there were still moments of doubt, moments when Christina wondered if she had made the right choice. She had agreed to give Jack a chance, but the road ahead wasn't clear. Mia, for the most part, seemed to take everything in stride. She had always been a bright and intuitive child, and even though the revelation of her father's identity had rocked her world, she adjusted faster than Christina had expected. She was excited to spend time with Jack, eager to get to know the man she had only heard about in passing, and Christina was relieved to see that Mia was happy. Yet, there was still a nagging feeling in Christina's chest. She was the one who had carried the weight of everything for so long. Mia's life, her happiness, had always been her responsibility alone. Now, there was someone else, someone with his own expectations, his own history, and Christina wasn't sure where she fit into all of it anymore. One evening, after dinner, Christina and Jack sat together on the couch, talking as Mia played in the other room. The conversation had been light at first, but there was a noticeable tension in the air, a quiet undercurrent of unspoken things. "I know this isn't easy for you," Jack said, his voice low, his eyes meeting Christina's. "But I want you to know, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Christina gave a small, tentative smile. "I know," she said, though a part of her still wondered. Wondered if he really meant it. Wondered if he understood what this all meant for her, for Mia. It's a lot. I've been doing this on my own for so long. And now, suddenly, everything's different." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "I can't imagine what it's been like for you, raising her on your own, all this time. But I'm here now, and I want to make it right. I want to be the father Mia deserves." There was sincerity in his voice, but Christina couldn't ignore the fact that they were still getting to know each other, that they were still trying to figure out what kind of relationship they could have, not just as father and daughter, but as partners in Mia's life. "I want that too," Christina said, her voice quieter now. "But I'm not going to lie. I'm scared. I don't know how to trust someone again, especially with Mia. She's everything to me." Jack leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I get it. I do. And I won't rush you. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove myself. I know I can't change the past, but I can try to make a better future for her. For both of you." Christina stared at him, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. She had always prided herself on being strong, on handling everything on her own. And now, Jack was offering to share that burden, but it was hard to let go of control. She had been the one to make every decision for Mia, to protect her from the world, and now, with Jack's presence, there was a shift, one that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. But the truth was, Mia needed a father. She needed someone who could help shape her life, someone who could be there for her in ways Christina couldn't. It was hard to admit, but Christina knew that Jack was that person. She just had to figure out how to let him in. "I don't know if I'm ready," Christina said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so long doing it all alone. I'm not sure how to let someone else in." Jack reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. "I understand, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here, and I want to be there for both of you." The warmth of his hand against hers was a reminder of how much had changed, of how much she had to let go of. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could build something together, but the fear of being let down again was overwhelming. She had been burned before. "I'm trying," Christina said, her voice shaky. "But it's hard. It's hard to trust, to believe that you'll stay. I've been so used to being the one to take care of everything." Jack squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with understanding. "I'm not asking you to do it all alone anymore. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I'm here for you both, that I'll be the father Mia needs, and the partner you deserve." Christina looked at him for a long moment, her heart torn between the fear of the unknown and the hope that things could be different. She wanted to let go of the fear. She wanted to trust Jack, to believe that he could truly be a part of their lives. But it was a slow process. "We'll take it one step at a time," Christina finally said. "That's all I can promise right now." Jack smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made her heart ache with the possibilities. "One step at a time," he agreed. For the first time in a long time, Christina allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. It wouldn't be easy, but together, they could figure it out. Together, they could create a family, one that was built on trust, love, and patience. Days passed, and the shifts at the restaurant seemed to drag on. Christina found herself caught in the delicate balance of trying to adjust to the new dynamic in her life. Jack had kept his word, showing up for Mia, spending time with her, and trying to be the father he had never been. Yet, despite all the effort, there were still moments of hesitation. Christina wasn't sure how to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. Every time she felt herself getting closer to trusting Jack, she was reminded of the pain she had carried for years, raising Mia on her own. And now, with Jack in the picture, it felt like she was opening herself up to the possibility of being hurt again. The next weekend, Jack called her, his voice lighter than usual. "How about we take Mia out this weekend? Just the three of us, like a family outing. I know she's been wanting to go to the zoo." Christina paused for a moment, considering his words. A part of her was reluctant. The idea of spending time as a family felt so foreign. Yet, she could sense the genuine desire in Jack's voice. He wasn't just saying things to make her feel better. He was trying, really trying. She had to give him credit for that. "That sounds nice," she said, her voice soft, hesitant but open. "I think Mia would love that. But, I don't know. It's just, still hard for me to get used to this." Jack didn't rush her. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for anything from you, Christina. Just a chance to show Mia that I want to be part of her life. That I want to be part of yours, too." Those words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so many years protecting Mia, doing everything on her own, that the thought of someone else being part of their life felt almost impossible. But for Mia's sake, and maybe for her own, Christina knew it was time to take a step forward. "Okay," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go to the zoo." Mia, when she heard the news, was ecstatic. She had been talking about going to the zoo for weeks, but Christina had always put it off, telling her it wasn't the right time. But now, with Jack involved, it felt like a good opportunity for all of them to create a new memory. A fresh start. On the day of the outing, the sun was shining, and there was a light breeze in the air. Christina felt a mix of emotions as she watched Mia bounce with excitement, her little legs moving quickly toward the door. Jack was waiting outside in his car, the engine humming softly as he leaned against the vehicle, a genuine smile on his face. It was the first time in weeks that he looked truly happy, and Christina realized that this was the first time she had allowed herself to feel hopeful, too. As they drove to the zoo, the car was filled with Mia's chatter. She was talking a mile a minute about the animals she wanted to see: giraffes, elephants, lions. Christina smiled, listening to her daughter's excitement. Jack joined in, asking questions, sharing his own memories of when he had been to the zoo as a child. It felt normal. For the first time, Christina didn't feel like an outsider in her own life. She wasn't trying to protect Mia from the world. She was allowing Mia to experience it with someone else, someone who wanted to be a part of their lives. The zoo was crowded with families, children running around, parents pushing strollers. Mia immediately ran toward the first exhibit, pointing excitedly at the giraffes. Jack walked beside her, his gaze lingering on her with a soft smile. Christina followed a few steps behind, keeping a close eye on them. She was still figuring out where she fit into this new family dynamic. She wasn't used to sharing the responsibility of raising Mia. But seeing Jack interact with her daughter, seeing how natural it seemed, made her heart ache with the realization that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Mia dragged them from one exhibit to another, her excitement never fading. They watched the elephants, took pictures with the monkeys, and even stopped at the snack bar for ice cream. It was a simple day, but it felt like something new, something real. As the day drew to a close and they made their way to the exit, Christina felt a sense of peace settle over her. The tension she had been holding on to for so long was slowly melting away. Mia had enjoyed the day, and Jack had been the father figure she needed. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was a start. Christina glanced at Jack, who was smiling at her. It was the first genuine smile he had given her in weeks. "Thanks for this," he said, his voice quiet. "I know it's not easy, but I'm glad we did this." Christina nodded, her heart full. "I'm glad, too." They walked to the car together, Mia holding both of their hands. As they drove back home, the city skyline growing smaller in the rearview mirror, Christina realized that this was the beginning of something new. Something uncertain, but full of possibility. It wasn't going to be perfect. There would be challenges, doubts, and fears to overcome. But for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, they could build a family together. And that thought gave her more hope than she had ever imagined. The weeks following the zoo trip felt like a delicate balancing act for Christina. Jack continued to show up, and Mia seemed to adapt to the new dynamic better than expected. Yet, despite their growing connection, Christina couldn't shake the unease that lingered inside her. It was as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff, uncertain whether to take the leap or hold back, afraid of what would happen next. There were still so many questions, so many things left unsaid between her and Jack. Every interaction, every moment they shared, felt both promising and fragile. As much as Christina wanted to embrace the possibility of them becoming a family, a part of her still held back. She couldn't forget the years she had spent alone, raising Mia, figuring out life without a partner. Jack, for all his efforts, was still a stranger in many ways. And Mia, though she had accepted him as her father, had her own process of adjustment. Christina couldn't ignore the look in her daughter's eyes when Jack called her sweetheart or princess. It was as if Mia was testing the waters, seeing if the words would fit, seeing if Jack would stay. Mia, though outwardly strong, was only a child, and Christina worried about the emotional toll this new relationship would take on her. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Mia's voice broke through Christina's thoughts one evening as they were sitting together on the couch. Christina turned to look at her daughter, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Mia hesitated for a moment, her small fingers playing with the edge of her blanket. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Dad?" Christina felt a lump form in her throat. It was the question she had been dreading, the one she had tried to avoid for so long. "I didn't think it was the right time," she said quietly, her voice soft. "I wanted to protect you, Mia. I didn't want you to get hurt." Mia looked up at her, her big eyes full of innocence but also understanding. "But I'm not a baby anymore, Mom. I need to know about him. I want to know about my dad." Christina felt the weight of her daughter's words, the heaviness of the trust Mia had placed in her. It was a moment of truth, a moment where all the barriers she had built around her heart came crashing down. "I know, sweetheart. I should have told you sooner," Christina admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But I was scared. Scared of what might happen. Scared that I wouldn't be able to protect you if things didn't work out." Mia leaned in closer, her small hand resting on Christina's arm. "You don't have to protect me from everything, Mom. I can handle it. I want to know him. I want to know my dad." The sincerity in Mia's voice made Christina's heart swell. It was a turning point, one that she couldn't ignore. She had spent so many years trying to shield Mia from the pain of not having a father, and now, Mia was telling her that she wanted to know him, that she wanted to give him a chance. "Okay," Christina whispered, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "We'll talk to him. We'll give him a chance." That night, after Mia went to bed, Christina sat by the window, her mind still racing. She had come to a decision, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. It never was. Jack had made his intentions clear, but could he really be the father Mia needed? Could he stay, even when the novelty wore off? Could Christina trust him not to disappear again? She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. Mia was ready, and so was she. The next morning, after breakfast, Christina told Mia that they would meet Jack that afternoon. Mia's face lit up with excitement, and for a brief moment, Christina saw the child she used to be, a little girl who believed in possibilities, who believed in people. When they arrived at Jack's office, Mia jumped out of the car before Christina could even stop her. She ran up to Jack with her arms wide open, and Jack, with a look of surprise and genuine warmth, crouched down to meet her. "Hi, Mia," he said, his voice tender. "I'm so glad to see you again." Mia smiled shyly, her cheeks pink. "I'm glad to see you too, Dad," she said, the words still unfamiliar on her tongue, but somehow fitting. Christina watched from a distance, her heart full. Jack stood up and glanced at her, his eyes searching for any sign of uncertainty. Christina offered him a small, tentative smile. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "No need to thank me. I'm the one who should be grateful that you're giving me a chance." They all walked into the park together, Jack and Mia chatting about the birds they could see flying overhead, while Christina stayed a step behind, quietly observing. It felt like a simple outing, yet it was more than that. It was a moment of connection, a moment where they were all trying to find their place in a world that had already been shaped by time. Christina didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Mia was happy, and Jack was trying. That was enough for now. As they walked toward the picnic table, Christina looked up at the sky, taking in the vastness of it all. There were so many unknowns ahead, but at this moment, she felt something shift inside her, a quiet acceptance. They were going to figure this out, together. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. And that was all that mattered. Months passed, and slowly but surely, things began to settle into a new routine. Jack, Christina, and Mia were adjusting to their new reality, a reality that had once seemed impossible. The awkwardness between them faded with each passing day, replaced by genuine moments of connection. Jack continued to make the effort, showing up when he said he would, spending time with Mia, and proving, day by day, that he was willing to be the father he had never been. Mia, for her part, had embraced the idea of having a father in her life. She was a smart, resilient child, and although it took time for her to fully understand the dynamics of their relationship, she accepted Jack without question. The more time they spent together, the more Mia began to open up, sharing little pieces of herself with Jack. She told him about school, her friends, and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Jack listened intently, his eyes always filled with warmth and interest. Christina watched this transformation with a mixture of awe and apprehension. She had always been Mia's only constant, her protector, and seeing her daughter so comfortably integrate Jack into her life made Christina feel a bit like an outsider. It was a strange feeling, but she knew it was something she had to accept. They were building something together, something real, even if it was still fragile. It was on a Saturday afternoon, several months after their first trip to the zoo, that Christina found herself sitting on the couch in their living room, the sound of Mia and Jack's laughter echoing from the kitchen. Jack was attempting to teach Mia how to bake cookies, something that had quickly become one of their favorite bonding activities. Christina smiled to herself, watching them from the doorway. Jack had become more than just a presence in their lives. He was becoming part of their family. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments and times when doubts crept in, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, Christina allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. "Hey, Mom, can you help us?" Mia called from the kitchen, her voice bubbling with excitement. Christina got up and walked into the kitchen, where Mia and Jack were covered in flour. The sight of her daughter, grinning from ear to ear as she passed the bowl of cookie dough to Jack, made Christina's heart swell. "What's going on in here?" she asked, trying to hide her smile. "We're making cookies," Jack said with a grin. "I think Mia's got the recipe down, but I might need a little more guidance." Mia laughed, nodding. "I think we've got it, but maybe a little help wouldn't hurt." Christina took a deep breath, then walked over to them. All right, she said, shaking her head. "Let's see what we've got." As they baked together, the atmosphere in the kitchen was warm, filled with laughter and easy conversation. There was no tension, no uncertainty, just the simple joy of being together. Jack and Mia were a team, and Christina was no longer just watching from the sidelines. She was a part of this, too. After the cookies were baked and the mess cleaned up, the three of them sat on the couch, eating cookies and watching a movie. Christina couldn't remember the last time she felt this content. The connection between them had grown stronger with each passing day. Jack had proven himself in small ways, showing up when he said he would, keeping his promises, and most importantly, making Mia feel loved. Mia, in turn, had learned to trust him, to see him not just as a figure from the past, but as a real, present part of her life. "You know," Jack said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd be sitting here like this. I always thought my life would be about business, about building an empire, but this is what I've been missing." Christina looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "It's not always easy," she said, her voice quiet. "There are days when I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I see Mia, and I know I did." Jack nodded, his expression serious but filled with gratitude. "I know I'm still earning your trust, Christina, but I'm not going anywhere. I want to be here for both of you, for as long as you'll have me." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Christina felt a lump form in her throat, but this time, it wasn't from fear or doubt. It was from a deep sense of relief. For so long, she had carried the burden of protecting Mia, of being both mother and father. But now, she was no longer alone. Jack had proven that he could be the father Mia needed. And maybe, just maybe, he could be the partner she deserved. I know, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. And I believe you. As the movie ended and they all settled in for the night, Christina felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The road had been long, and there had been so many uncertainties along the way. But now, sitting here with Jack and Mia, she felt like they were finally starting to build something real, a family. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that, in itself, was enough. Jack had become a part of their lives, and Mia had found the father she had always deserved. And for the first time in a long time, Christina could see the future with hope. They were no longer just surviving. They were living. And together, they would face whatever came next.